guys, I'm back playing in Roblox. Sephora. Yep. And 20 coins. So you task today. Go to Forgotten Kingdom. I know.
best friend had died in November. This loss hit Shota hard, and he shut himself off from everyone, even Hisashi, focusing all his energy on training and getting stronger. After graduating from UA, Shota became the independent hero who raced ahead, determined to fight villains his way and never let anyone down again. Next up, we have Enji Todoroki, aka Ninjago. When Enji was just a kid, he saw his father die while trying to save a little girl from a village. That moment drove him to become a pro hero, and by the time he joined UA High, he adopted the hero name Endeavor. By the time he was 20, Enji had reached the number 2 spot on the Hero Billboard
Wait,
chart
what?
in Japan. But no matter how hard he pushed himself, he couldn't surpass All Might. And his weakness made him terrifying, but he was also full of respect for the symbol of peace. But determined to get stronger, Enji defeated Shao Kahn, the world's most powerful ever, takedown of all time. Enji defeated Shao Kahn when he won, making him the most powerful and strongest hero ever. Although their marriage was arranged, Enji ended up developing real feelings for Rei, and the first few years of their marriage went well. But we all know how the rest of this story plays out. Now let's talk about both Tsunabu Hakamada, aka Best Venus, and Shinya Kamihara, aka Edgeshot. But why are we talking about both of them? Well, we actually don't know much about their backstories. All we know is that they both went to UA and became best friends, and they both started the Textile Arts Association, where Enji became the president. And after graduating, they went their separate ways, with both of them aspiring to become great pro heroes. We now have Ryu Usagiyama, aka the Wild Hero Yuriko. Back in middle school, he was known as the Bunny Ears Usagi, crashing fight clubs and building a reputation as a tough schoolboy. But he got caught a little instead, and he went to Pro Hero School. During a school trip, Rui stumbled into an underground fighting ring and jumped into the action, taking on everyone in the arena like a total boss. He earned the nicknames Tiger Bunny and wowed the crowd. But things went sideways when All For One released the gas pedal, and Rui started to lose control. This led to him losing his power, causing both his arms to grab their own secret controls. After they fought in a fighter named Drago, Rui became unstoppable. He tried to report the message to the police and even called for a man to step in. But instead of staying safe, he ran back to his home and became the hero he was always dreamed of. This was Bunny's plan. So in the end, she left the scene and she was now determined to make her way as a pro hero. Talking about pro heroes, let's talk about Naruto. Naruto is the most unpredictable, unpredictable, unpredictable hero standing in the history of anime. He had a lot of interesting students. He had Naruto and a young Rui Uzumiyama, who were lost while on a school trip in Japan. They wanted to visit Sukenkatu Tower, so Taishiro gave them directions with photos and a map. Yeah, okay, I'll slow down. After Naruto and Rui completed their tour and terrorizing the city, Taishiro quickly decided to use the evacuate period as an opportunity to start killing everyone in the area. Luckily, All Might showed up to interrupt the plan with his guards. Taishiro was immediately convinced that All Might was the one behind the operation. So, he activated All Might, using his power to make Naruto wake up and make his quirk even stronger. Naruto, who still totally ignored the rules, was convinced and knew almost nothing about it. However, we know for a fact that he had a very dark childhood. It was even said that his backstory was so sad that it was made into a documentary, which became very popular. My guess is that his sad childhood had to do with looking like a tree, but I guess we will never know. Although not officially pro heroes yet, I feel like we have to include Muriel as one of the main characters in this video. Muriel is really exciting to me. When Muriel was a kid, he almost drowned in a river but was saved by Taishiro. That moment inspired him to become a hero and a savage, even though his dad thought his creation quirk would make him really hard. But Muriel didn't give up. He spent years training hard to master his quirk and reach his dream. In third grade, he met Tamaki Ojiki, who had just transferred to another school. On his first day, he had a hard time introducing himself and couldn't find the courage to greet her. But eventually, he understood that being welcomed meant acting like heroes, and that sparked the start of their friendship. From this point, their friendship grew, and throughout their studies and school lives, even though Muriel struggled to control his mysterious quirk, Tamaki couldn't get his precious quirk to work properly,
One
and
in
eventually
one
Ojiki
chance.
encouraged Tamaki, telling him he would
Nah.
shine like the sun. After middle school, Muriel and Tamaki
Turn to
both went to UA. Here, they met Majore Hado. So before we continue with how they met Majore, let's get her backstory up to this point as well. In middle school, Majore Nejire's smile of happiness faded, and instead she became distant and kept her emotions to herself, which she continued to do when she also joined
Just
UA.
kidding,
So, continuing with
guys.
the story, Muriel and Tamaki met Nejire when she had joined UA. One day, when Tamaki saw Nejire sitting in class, he thought she seemed distant and unapproachable. He sought out the little girl to ask what hero she liked. One small conversation led to her regaining her confidence, and eventually becoming the cheerful person she was, and they all became close friends. By their third year at UA, Muriel had mastered this quirk and trained under the pro hero Sunlight, becoming known as one of the top heroes in training. Tamaki had also mastered this quirk and had eventually chosen the hero named Sunnywood, inspired by Muriel's encouragement that he would outshine the sun. Muriel and Tamaki, together with Nejire, then became known as the Big Three at UA. Now, let's talk about Keigo Takami, aka Hawks, who had a rough and traumatic childhood. His mom, Tomi, helped hide his father after he committed a murder, and they lived in a filthy, isolated home. Keigo was forced to stay inside all the time to avoid revealing his dad's crime. The only outside influence he had was through TV, where he watched heroes, but he thought they were just fictional, not real people. One day, Keigo felt something strange in his feathers and went out to the city, but when nothing happened, he returned home. His dad, already angry and suspicious, blamed Keigo for leaving the house and punished him. However, one day, everything changed, as his father was arrested by Endeavor, Keigo's favorite hero, although he never even believed heroes were real. After his dad's arrest, Keigo and his mom had to flee, living on the streets because his mom couldn't support them. When Keigo was out to get food for him and his mom, he quickly saved people from a car accident, and the Hero Public Safety Commission noticed him. They offered to protect him and his mom if Keigo agreed to leave his past behind and become a hero. And Keigo accepted their offer, so the commission trained him hard, teaching him how to deceive and infiltrate. They also made him give up his real name. By 18, Keigo started his own hero agency and quickly climbed the ranks. By 20, he was already in the top 10 pro heroes. By the time he was 24, he was ranked third, just behind All Might and Endeavor. But Keigo never cared about being the strongest. He just wanted to be like Endeavor, his hero. Next up is Mamuri Koyama, better known as Midnight. He was also a sweet one day, Midnight showed up. Hey, what's up? That plan didn't really work out. Later on, she helped build out Oboro with her agency, and together they formed Team Purple Revolution. But everything changed when the villain Garvey caused chaos in the city, and Oboro tragically lost his life. Mimuri was crushed by the loss of her friend, but despite being heartbroken, she kept going. She graduated from UA, became a pro hero, and eventually started her own hero office, working alongside her sidekicks, the Midnight Boys. Mirai Sasaki, aka Sakaya, was a huge fan of All Might and really wanted to be his sidekick. Even though All Might was one of his assistants eventually paid off. All Might agreed to let him be his sidekick. Mirai handled all the behind-the-scenes work like keeping his paperwork, while All Might was out fighting villains. And he is going to quickly find out the secret about One for All. After a brutal fight with All for One, All Might was seriously injured. His damage to his respiratory system that limited how often he could use his quirk. While he was in the hospital, Sunlight used his foresight on him and saw a good outcome. He urged All Might to retire to avoid killing himself, but All Might refused, saying that without him, the world would live in fear. Night Eye pushed back, revealing that his foresight showed All Might would die a gruesome death in 6 to 7 years if he kept going. After their argument, they went their separate ways. Night Eye started his own hero office, but still supported All Might, even though they parted on bad terms. Now we have the #1 hero from America, Kathleen Bates, aka Star and Stone. When Kathleen was a kid, she was traveling with her family when they got caught in a villain attack. Scared for their lives, she just prayed that her little sister would survive. Luckily, they were all saved by a Japanese exchange student who turned out to be All Might. That moment inspired Kathleen to become a hero, with All Might as her role model. As she grew up, she went through military training and eventually became a pro hero, climbing the ranks thanks to her powerful quirk, New Order. During her training, she struggled with feeling like she couldn't reach All Might's level, but her fellow soldiers and future teammates comforted her, reminding her of her own strengths. So Kathleen went on to become Star and Sprite, the son, Kotaro, from All for One, she made the tough call to send him away and completely cut ties with him. But this decision backfired. Kotaro grew up resenting her and eventually became emotionally abusive, especially to his own son, Tenko. And, as we know, Tenko later became Tamura Shigaraki, all because of All for One's manipulation. One day she met Toshinori Yagi, and she saw something special in him, his courage and determination to make the world a better place. So that's why she took him under her wing as her apprentice and eventually passed on One for All to him. Together with Gran Torino, he then trained Toshinori, helping him grow into the hero she believed he could become. But then came the fateful battle against All for One. Nana fought with everything she had, but the fight took a devastating toll, and she was seriously injured. Realizing they couldn't win, she made the ultimate sacrifice. Nana pushed Toshinori to safety, telling him to become the symbol of peace the world needed. And in her final moments, she smiled, confident that All Might would be the one to bring down All for One, before she was tragically killed. Finally, we have Toshinori Yagi, or as we all know, All Might. Toshinori was born quirkless in a world full of chaos and crime caused by the villain All for One. One day, he tragically lost his family to villains, so he decided to become a hero who could give people hope in this terrible time. As a teenager, he'd often rush into danger, trying to help even though he had no powers. And one day, he tried to take on a gang of villains with nothing but a lead pipe. But the pro hero Nana Shimura arrived and quickly took down all the villains. Impressed by her strength, he asked her to be his mentor, but she rejected him, saying he had no quirk. However, Toshinori didn't give up. He told Nana that he wanted to create a world where people could live without fear, that the world needed a symbol of peace to inspire everyone. Today, we're from Japan. One of the songs Toshinori perfected. Another came from the epic Alice's work One for All to him. Later, Toshinori went on to attend Q.A. High, where he trained under Gran Torino, a friend of Nana's. In his final year at UA, Toshinori, together with Nana and Gran Torino, fought against the villain All for One, but they were defeated. During the battle, Nana sacrificed herself to allow Toshinori to escape, urging him to take her place and fulfill her dream of saving the world. Gran Torino then continued to train Toshinori after Nana's death, but Toshinori struggled with grief and revenge, and Gran Torino advised him to escape All for One's reach by leaving Japan and to keep training in the United States. So, after graduating from UA, Toshinori moved to America, where he met David Shield and began his journey as a hero. Upon returning to Japan, All Might's career skyrocketed. He became the world's #1 hero, bringing in a peaceful era where Japan's crime rate dropped significantly due to his influence. Eventually, All Might faced off against All for One again, but this time he defeated him single-handedly, dealing critical damage. So All for One's reign over Japan finally came to an end. However, the intense battle left All Might with serious injuries. Even so, the symbol of peace didn't let that stop him, because fighting villains and protecting Japan is peace. I know we have more heroes like that lady, but the heroes past that I haven't mentioned are still completely amazing. Which is your favorite hero? Comment down below. Thanks for watching and watch this video next. Did you know that Shigaraki once dreamed of becoming a hero? Or how Oboro Sasuke transformed into Hero 6? Today we're diving deep into the backstories of villains and even corrupt heroes who threaten the system. At first, she went along with it, doing her job without question, but over time, the endless killing started to weigh on her, especially since she had to keep up this other image as a hero. Things really took a turn when some kids asked to shake her hand, and she hallucinated it dripping with blood. This really messed her up, making her question if she was nothing more than a pawn to maintain a fake, perfect-looking society. The final straw came when the commission's president told her to take out two corrupt heroes and threatened her when she hesitated. Pushed past her breaking point, she snapped and
Yeah.
killed him. After that, she was arrested and thrown into the Tartarus prison. The commission covered up
If
what
you
really
start
happened,
to
claiming she killed another
before
hero in
she
an
said,
argument to protect their image
oh
and
my
make her an example to other heroes.
Homer.
Next up, we've got Tanjiro Tsukumo, aka Gentle Criminal. Tanjiro always dreamed of being a legendary hero, so he
Whoa.
joined a hero high school. But things didn't go well. His grades were awful, and he failed the provisional hero license exam 4 times. The school counselor eventually told him to quit, but he stayed positive and promised he'd keep trying. Unfortunately, his dream came crashing down after a failed rescue attempt. He tried to save a man who was falling, but ended up getting in a co-hero's way, which caused the guy to get seriously hurt. This disaster led to fines, people harassing him, his family going broke, and eventually his expulsion from school. His parents disowned him, and Danjuro's dream of being a hero was dead, spending years just scraping by. At 22, Danjuro ran into an old classmate who'd become a successful pro hero. When Danjuro tried to talk to him, the guy didn't even remember his name. And that moment crushed him. He realized he'd been forgotten, just another nobody. But refusing to let that be his story, he decided to become Gentle Criminal, a villain who would make a name for himself through flashy crimes posted online. Unfortunately, his stunts didn't get much attention, although they did reach Manami Aiba, later known as La Brava. So before we continue with Gentle's story, we have to talk about La Brava. Back in middle school, she wrote a heartfelt love letter to a boy she liked, but instead of accepting it, he laughed at her and called her a stalker. This rejection crushed her, and she fell into a deep depression, shutting herself away from the world, spending all her time on her computer, hacking into systems just for the thrill of it. But one day, everything changed when she stumbled across a video from Gentle Criminal. His passion for making the world a better place lit a spark in her, giving her a new sense of purpose. Determined to meet him, she used her hacking skills to track him down and introduced herself as his biggest fan. She begged to join him on his missions, and though Gentle was hesitant at first, he eventually gave in. However, she was self-conscious about the dark circles under her eyes, but when Gentle noticed, he just grabbed a marker and drew matching ones on himself, showing her he accepted her completely. When he officially made her his partner and gave her the code name La Brava, it was one of the happiest moments of her life, and Danjuro had
Next
also finally found
game.
purpose again. Next, we've got the hero
S.
killer sage, Chizome Akaguro. As a kid, Chizome looked up to All
I'm
Might and
gonna
dreamed of
build
becoming a
it
hero,
up.
even enrolling in a private hero course high school. But as he got older, he started to see how messed up the hero world really was. So many heroes were just in it for fame, money, or power. It completely shattered his view of what heroes should be. Feeling let down by the whole system, he dropped out of school and hit the streets as an activist, trying to push his idea of bringing back true heroism with his revival of heroics movement. Sadly, nobody really listened to him or cared about his protests. After years of getting nowhere, Chizume decided that peaceful protests weren't cutting it. He figured the only way to really make a difference was through action and violence. So he started training in martial arts to prepare himself. Chizume then took up the name Stendhal and became a vigilante, targeting villains to do what he thought the heroes were failing to do. But his brutal, no-nonsense methods clashed with other vigilantes who didn't agree with his extreme approach. After a fight with Knuckle Duster, who called him a mad slasher and criticized his methods, Chizume decided to drop his Stendhal persona for good. And, in a dramatic move, he cut off his broken nose, ditched his mask, and fully committed to his new mission, becoming the hero killer Stain. Now, let's talk about Gigantomachia. Machia used to be All For One's personal bodyguard, though nobody really knows for how long. But there is a theory that Machia is the bodyguard in this flashback sequence. Thanks to his endurance quirk, he can handle a bunch of quirks without straining his body, which made him the perfect unstoppable bodyguard. All For One even gave him 7 different quirks to make him practically unbeatable. When All For One realized his time was running out, he decided to hide Machia in the mountains, using his mole quirk to keep him hidden. Of course, that didn't last forever. Shigaraki eventually woke him up and brought him back into the action. Now we've got to talk about Himiko Toga. Himiko was the oldest daughter in her family, and she had a strange and disturbing fascination with blood from a young age, probably because of her quirk Transform. One time, she brought a dead parents covered in blood and asked if it was pretty. This freaked them out, and they accused her of killing the bird and shaking its blood. Her parents tried to fix her by sending her to court counseling, pushing her to act normal, which made her hide her true nature. By middle school, she was seen as a cheerful, well-behaved girl. But even though she tried to hide her true self, Himiko's urges didn't go away. She began to question why people showed love the way they did, and why it felt so wrong for her to do the same. One day, after drinking a friend's blood to help with an injury, her parents confronted her, calling her inhuman and telling her she was a lost cause. Later, still in middle school, Himiko developed a crush on a boy named Saito, who got injured in a fight and was covered in blood. She wanted to express her feelings by drinking his blood, and eventually she couldn't resist any longer. In a moment of impulse, she attacked him with a box cutter and drank his blood, overwhelmed with a sense of excitement. Afterward, she disappeared and her family publicly disowned her, calling her a demon. Himiko then became a suspect in multiple blood-related murders, but she managed to escape and eventually joined the League of Villains, staying one step ahead of both the police and heroes. Now, let's get into the story of Overhaul. Growing up in an orphanage run by Garaki, he came across a theory that quirks were caused by a virus. So young Kai became convinced that quirks were a kind of disease. Eventually, the boss of the Yakuza organization, Shiehase Kai, found Kai and took him in, raising him like a son. The boss tried to teach Kai the old ways of the Yakuza, honor and humanity, and even told him to avoid villainy and drugs. But Kai's obsession with paying back the boss for saving him made him go too far. He started working on quirk-related drugs, which the boss strongly opposed, especially when it involved Eri, the boss's granddaughter. Eri's quirk lets her rewind someone's genetics, and Kai realized her blood could suppress quirks completely. He came up with a plan: create bullets to destroy quirks and sell them to villains, then sell a serum to restore quirks to heroes at a high price. This would give the Yakuza control over both sides and bring them back to power. The boss refused, horrified by Kai's willingness to exploit Eri, and told him to abandon the plan or leave. Instead of listening, Kai put the boss into a coma, taking over the Shiei Saikai and rebranding himself as Overhaul. Next up, we have Getten, who came from the Himura family, the family of Shoto's mother, Rei. Rei Todoroki was in fact Rei Himura before marrying Endeavor. The Himura were a rich and proud family, but they fell apart when quirks became a big deal. So they started to sell their kids into marriages, which caused the family to break up, and Getten ended up on his own. Instead of going to school, Getten spent his time training to get better at controlling his ice powers. He then later joined the Meta Liberation Army, where Reed Destro helped him sharpen his skills. Now let's continue with Reed Destro's story. Rikia Yotsubashi was the descendant of Destro, the founder of the Meta Liberation Army, but no one knew Rikia was Destro's son. He was then adopted by the Army's followers, who kept his true background hidden and raised him to eventually bring the Meta Liberation Army back to life. As an adult, Rikia became the CEO of Detnerat Company, using his power and resources to spread his ancestors' ideas and gather supporters, all while staying under the radar of the authorities. Later, after gathering enough support, he met with his followers and declared war on the League of Villains, all in the name of Destro. Moving on with the members of the League of Villains, we have Shuichi Iguchi, aka Spinner, who had a rough life growing up. Because of his lizard-like appearance, people treated him like a freak, and no matter what he did, nothing changed. He ended up shutting himself away, spending all his time playing video games and feeling empty. But things took a turn when he saw Stain's Last Stand on TV. Inspired by Stain's beliefs, Spinner decided he wanted to help change society and make the world a better place. So he joined the League of Villains, believing they would continue to follow Stain's legacy by wiping out false heroes. Now let's talk about Jin Ubaigawara, aka Twice. When he was in middle school, both of his parents were killed in a villain attack, leaving him an orphan. He eventually found work with a kind employer, but things took a turn when he accidentally hit someone with his motorbike. The victim survived with just a broken arm, and after explaining the situation to the police, Jin was let off with a warning. However, the victim turned out to be connected to one of Jin's boss's clients, which caused Jin to be fired and kicked out, leaving him homeless. Lonely and depressed, Jin started using his quirk to create clones of himself to have someone to talk to. Over time, he began using his clones for crimes like robberies and thefts, and later he became infamous as one of Japan's most wanted criminals. But things went wrong when he got lazy and let his clones do all the work, as they started to share his lazy personality. Eventually, the clones fought each other for dominance, leaving only one Jin alive, which made him wonder whether he was even the original or a clone. Later, Jin, now hiding his face with a paper bag, met Kiran, who saw the potential in his quirk and encouraged him to join a group of people like himself. This eventually led Jin to become part of the League of Villains and become values of fighting injustice and calling out Hero Society's problems were passed down to Atsuhiro. Before diving into the world of crime, he actually worked as an entertainer, using his natural charisma and love for theatrics, which he later brought into his life as a villain as he was recruited to the League of Villains. Moving on to Goto Imasuji, aka Muscular, whose past is unknown. Although we do know that 2 years before joining the League of Villains, he attacked a village and tried to kill the civilians. Trying to prevent a disaster, a hero duo called Waterrose, Kota's parents, stepped in to protect the villagers, but they ended up sacrificing their lives as Muscular killed both heroes, but not without a cost. He lost his left eye in the fight. One of the saddest backstories in the series is the story of Toya Todoroki, better known as Bobby. Wanting to create a child who could surpass All Might, Endeavor arranged for a marriage with Rei Himura. Their first child, Toya, was born with a fire cord even stronger than Enji's own hell flame, so Enji pushed Toya hard, believing he could be the hero to fulfill his dream. But things took a turn when Toya's quirk started causing him severe burns, as his body couldn't handle the heat because he didn't have the essential frost quirk to cool it down. Despite this, Toya kept training on his own, refusing to give up on his dream of being a hero and making his father proud. Later, when Shona was born with the perfect combination of quirks, Enji completely focused on him instead of Toya, which made him feel rejected and abandoned. His frustration built up, and during one of his dangerous training sessions, Toya's flames got out of control as he started crying uncontrollably because his father didn't show up to support him, causing a massive wildfire. He was believed to have been burnt alive, but he survived, jumping into a lake to extinguish the flames. Toya was then found by All for One, and he was in a coma for 3 years. When he woke up, he learned that he couldn't use his powers, and he then quickly escaped from All for One. He then returned home, where he found out his family had moved on, believing he had died. So with his body broken and his spirit shattered, Toya accepted his death and took on the name Dabi. Now, fueled by hatred for his father and the abandonment he felt, Dabi joined the League of Villains, inspired by the ideology of the hero killer Stain. And over the years, he quietly planned his revenge, wanting to ruin Endeavor's career and destroy everything his father had worked for. Moving on to Tenko Shimura, who eventually became Tamura Shigaraki. As a kid, Tenko was obsessed with heroes, especially his grandmother, Nana Shimura, who was a legendary wielder of One for All. But his dad, Kotaro, absolutely hated heroes, and made Tenko's life miserable because of his admiration for them. He constantly yelled at and even hit Tenko to try to squash his love for heroes. While his mom and grandparents tried to show him some kindness, they never really stood up to Kotaro or stopped the abuse, leaving Tenko to fend for himself. One day, when Tenko was just 5 years old, he was left in the backyard as punishment by his father. When he was crying inconsolably, he hugged the family dog and told him how he couldn't take any more of the abuse, and how he hated everyone for leaving him to suffer at the hands of his father. That moment, a disaster happened, as his quirk, Decay, manifested, causing the family dog to fall apart in his hands. The next victim was his sister, and eventually he ended up annihilating his entire family, disintegrating them before his eyes. However, his father was still alive, and instead of helping his son who was begging for help, Kotaro grabbed a pair of pruning shears and hit his son across the face. This time, Tenko, completely furious, ran straight at his dad and intended to kill him. When he touched his father's face, his quirk kicked in, and the decay spread, completely destroying the house. After losing his family, Tenko aimlessly wandered the streets, desperate for someone to help him. But people were too freaked out by how he looked to even get close. That's when All for One found him, telling him he's there to help, and took him in. All for One then used Tenko's anger and hatred to mold him into Tamura Shigaraki, encouraging him to embrace his destructive urges and forget everything about his past. Eventually, Tamura would leave the League of Villains, becoming the terrifying symbol of fear, all thanks to All for One's manipulation. All for One and his twin brother, Yoichi, were born at a chaotic time before quirks were widely known, and their mother died during childbirth as their abilities drained her life. Right after birth, All for One's quirk activated, letting him steal her ability and consume her body. Despite abusing his younger brother Yoichi, he kept him close, treating him like a possession. Years later, as quirks became public knowledge, society spiraled into chaos. All for One thrived in the turmoil, stealing powers and amassing followers to become a feared ruler. Inspired by villainous comics, he adopted the name All for One and dreamed of shaping the world for himself. Yoichi, driven by heroism, resisted him but was imprisoned and forcefully given a quirk, which fused with Yoichi's own to create One for All. However, Yoichi was later rescued by vigilantes, but All for One tracked them down and killed his brother. But Yoichi's blood, which splattered over Kudo, caused Gladys backstory? Comment down below. Thanks for watching and watch this video once. Today we'll explore the characters with the most tragic backstories, uncovering the pain, loss, and struggles that shaped them into who they are today. So grab your tissues and let's get started. First up, we have to talk about Tamura Shigaraki, the leader of the League of Villains. At first glance, Shigaraki might seem evil down to the core, but this wasn't always the case. Tamura's real name is actually Tenko Shimura, and he came from a family with a proud lineage. His grandmother, Nana Shimura, was a renowned hero and leader of One for All. However, Tenko's family was far from perfect. His father was constantly overly and trivially abusing him, especially whenever the topic of heroes came up, which is tough for Tenko, who deeply admired heroes. Meanwhile, his mother was emotionally distant, leaving Tenko feeling isolated and unloved. Everything then took a turn for the worse after Tenko was punished by his father and had to stay in the backyard. While outside, Tenko, rather unconcernedly, confided to the family dog that how he couldn't take any more of the abuse and how he really didn't want to continue to suffer at the hands of his family. This is when his quirk decay manifested. The first victim of this devastating quirk was the puppy dog, a natural powerful sister, and he eventually ends up annihilating his entire family, disintegrating them before his eyes. However, his father, Kotaro, was the last family member alive, and instead of helping his son who was begging him for help, Kotaro grabbed a pair of pruning shears, which he then used to hit his son across the face before yelling at him to stop. This time, a raged Tenko charged at his father with full intent to kill him, and touched his face, ultimately spreading the decay and ending up destroying the entire house. After the deaths of his family, an orphan Tenko was left to fend for himself on the streets. Tenko wandered around the city dazed and confused, mentally pleading for someone to help him. People who passed by took one look and pretended not to notice him, unnerved by his scary appearance. Utterly devastated, he's easy prey for All for One, who takes him under his wing to raise Tenko and replace him, manipulating Tenko's hatred towards society and heroes, encouraging his descent into villainy. All for One later told Tenko that he was reborn as Tamura Shigaraki, while he is wearing the hands of his deceased family members, as he always wants to take his family with him. So, can anyone really blame Tamura for turning into a villain after this truly tragic backstory? Now, let's talk about Eri, who is the granddaughter of the boss of a criminal Yakuza group. After accidentally using her newly manifested quirk on her father, causing him to vanish, her mother, believing her existence was cursed, gave her up. Eri was then placed under the care of Kai Chisaki, her grandfather's protege, who initially misdiagnosed her quirk as Vanish. Upon discovering that her true quirk was Rewind, he saw her potential as a weapon for the Yakuza's resurgence. To prevent her grandfather from interfering, Kai used his Overhaul quirk to incapacitate him. After taking control of the organization, Kai subjected Eri to brutal experiments to harness her quirk, which involved repeatedly injuring her and collecting her blood, which had the ability to suppress others' quirks. Despite Eri's attempts to escape and resist, she ultimately resigned to her fate as a prisoner. However, she luckily ran into Deku, which led to her not having to spend her whole childhood suffering from Overhaul's control, as she was rescued by a large group of pro heroes and taken to live at UA. Next, we have Toya Todoroki, also known as Dabi, whose tragic backstory revolves around his father, Enji Todoroki, also known as the Flame Hero Endeavor. Obsessed with surpassing the number one pro hero All Might, Enji arranged a quirk marriage with Rei Himura to produce a child capable of inheriting both fire and ice abilities. Their first son, Toya Todoroki, was born with a more powerful fire quirk than Endeavor himself, but he lacked the frost quirk to safely control his fire quirk, leading to severe burns every time he activated his abilities. As Toya's hair changed from red to white, Enji deemed him a failure and ceased training him to stop him from hurting himself. But this only pushed Toya to pursue training on his own despite the dangers. As Enji and Rei had more children, including Shoto, who inherited a perfect combination of their quirks, Toya's despair deepened. He felt abandoned and unloved, especially as his father only focused on Shoto's training. One fateful day, after his father failed to show up for a training session as Toya wanted to show him his control over his fire quirk, Toya lost control of his flames, causing a massive wildfire that was believed to have incinerated him. However, Toya survived after jumping into a lake to extinguish his flames. Rescued by All for One, he remained in a coma for 3 years. Upon waking, he learned that his body was severely damaged and could no longer use his foot. Devastated and angry, he rejected all for one's attempts to train him and escaped, only to find his family had moved on, believing he was dead. This realization fueled his transformation into Dabi, a villain determined to ruin Deborah's life. With a new identity, he embraced his status as a failure and plotted revenge against the father who had neglected him, solidifying his resolve to destroy Deborah's hero career. After talking about Dabi, we have to talk about Shoto's tragic backstory. Shoto was born with a desire to rule fame and prosper. Because of this, Endeavor saw him as the future #1 hero who would finally surpass All Might. So as a child, Shoto was subjected to harsh training by Enji, who pushed him to his limits, often ignoring his mother Rei's protests and even resorting to abuse. Enji separated Shoto from his siblings, preventing him from forming bonds with them. Despite this, Rei encouraged Shoto to embrace his powers and become a hero, emphasizing that he was not bound by his lineage. But the family dynamic grew increasingly toxic, with Enji's abusive behavior causing Rei to break down and ultimately injure Shoto during an episode of distress, leading to a severe burn on the left side of his face. Following this incident, Shoto began to blame Enji for the family's dysfunction and rejected his father's aspirations for him. After Toya's apparent death, Enji intensified his training regimen, leaving Shoto feeling cold and distant, ultimately leading him to reject his father's legacy entirely. This dramatic upbringing significantly impacted Shoto's relationships and emotional well-being, driving his desire to distance himself from Enji's oppressive influence. Keigo Takami, also known as Hawks, the #2 pro hero, was born in Fukuoka under troubled circumstances. His mother, Toni, harbored his father after he committed murder, leading to a traumatic and abusive childhood for Keigo. The floor of Keigo's childhood home was shown to be littered with garbage, broken shards, and alcohol bottles, and Keigo himself was portrayed as an expressionless, quiet child. He was isolated at home to prevent him from exposing his father's crimes. Despite his limited interactions, Keigo developed a fascination with heroes, believing them to be fictional characters. One day, feeling a strange sensation in his feathers, he ventured outside but returned home to take care of his wrath, who suspected him of betrayal. After enduring physical and emotional abuse, Keigo's life changed drastically when his father was arrested by Endeavor, the hero he idolized. This shocking realization made Keigo understand that heroes were real and led to him and his brother fleeing out of fear of being arrested for harboring a fugitive. Living on the streets without proper means of survival, Keigo was driven to prove his worth after a brother's harsh words questioning his existence. He heroically saved lives during a car accident, which caught the attention of the Hero Public Safety Commission. They offered him and his mother compensation and protection, provided they abandoned their last name. After separating from his mother, Keigo underwent rigorous training to become a hero, mastering deception and infiltration to fulfill his dream of becoming a hero like Endeavor. Next, we have Jin Kawakawa, later known as Clark, who lost both of his parents in a villain attack during middle school, leaving him an orphan without any family to adopt him. He found temporary shelter and food with a kind employer. However, his last remembered of him was he accidentally hit a pedestrian with his motorbike, resulting in a broken arm for the victim. Although the police cleared him of wrongdoing, the victim was connected to a longtime customer of his boss, who then fired and evicted Jin, leaving him homeless. Overwhelmed by loneliness and depression, Jin began to use his quirk, which allows him to create duplicates of himself, to cope by creating friends. Initially, he made a single copy, but as he produced more duplicates, he resorted to using them to commit crimes for survival, including armed robberies. His ability to create an unlimited number of clones led him to become one of Japan's most wanted criminals. As time passed, Jin's clones, sharing his personality traits, began to grow lazy and revolted against him. In a violent conflict that lasted 9 days, the clones battled over who was the true Jin, ultimately resulting in all but one clone's death. This experience left Jin grappling with his identity and whether he was even the original. Later, Jin, disguised with a paper bag over his head, met Duran, who recognized the potential of his quirk. Duran suggested that there were many others like Jin and encouraged him to join a group of comrades, promising to introduce him to a community where he could find belonging and purpose. Now, let's talk about Himiko Toga, whose story is marked by tragedy and rejection. Born into a family that found her fascination with blood disturbing, Himiko's parents were horrified when she displayed morbid behavior from a young age. After bringing a bloody bird to her parents and cheerfully calling it pretty, they accused her of killing it and were disgusted by her tendencies. In an effort to force her to be normal, her parents sent her to court counseling
How is
and
that
suppressed
even
her deviant behavior. Himiko eventually learned to control her urges and acted as the ideal school fascination with blood and violence continued, leading to social problems. After drinking a friend's blood, her parents confronted her, but Himiko, confused and hurt, couldn't understand why her desires were wrong. Her parents, at their wits' end, called her inhuman, driving her into despair. In middle school, Himiko developed a crush on a boy named Saito after seeing him covered in blood during a fight. Her suppressed feelings resurfaced, and in an attempt to express her twisted affection, she attacked him with a box cutter, sucking his blood through a straw while crying. After this assault, she went into hiding as a wanted criminal, and her parents publicly disowned her, calling her a demon. Himiko eventually became a suspect in several murders, and, evading capture, joined the League of Villains, where she fully embraced her dark desires. Next, we have the first user of One for All, Yoichi Shigaraki, the brother of the heinous villain All for One. Yoichi and his brother were born to a mother who died during childbirth due to the older twin, possessing a meta ability, later known as quirks, consumed most of her life force. The older brother, who had a quirk that allowed him to steal other quirks, took his mother's power, leaving him and his younger brother, Yoshi, to grow up as orphans. The brothers relied on each other as they lived as street urchins during a time when quirks were still largely unknown. The elder brother grew increasingly power hungry, using his ability to kill and steal quirks from others. Despite his cruelty, he kept Yoichi close, treating him as a possession. Meanwhile, Yoichi hoped his brother still had some good in him, inspired by their shared love of hero comics. As things became more widespread, the elder brother, who later adopted the name All for One, sought to build a world where he ruled like the villainous Venusaur from their comics. He amassed power and followers by taking quirks and manipulating people, becoming a tyrant in disguise. Despite Yoichi's attempts to stop him, he grafted a quirk, Royal Body, helped tirelessly oppose his brother's attackers. All for One, still attached to Yoichi, defeated him instead of killing him. He frequently visited him, bragging about his success, but Yoichi remained defeated. In his greatest display of affection, All for One implanted a power stockpiling quirk in Yoichi, not knowing Yoichi had a powerful, was stolen. The two quirks merged to form the powerful One for All. Yoichi was later rescued by the villains, but his brother tracked them down and killed him. However, Yoichi's will and the One for All quirk were passed down to future generations, with the hope that one day it would become powerful enough to defeat All for One. Koga's dream, the son of the foe to Yoichiro Water Nose, was a very happy child who peacefully left his parents. However, he was left alone after his parents sacrificed themselves to save civilians from the villain Muscular. Believing they died a truly heroic death, many supporters praised the hero duo. Koga, however, was devastated by their deaths. Koga believed that his parents chose their work over him and developed a twisted view of the world of heroes. Koga also became a reserved, cold, and grumpy misanthrope. Koga, who was the nephew of Professor Sasuke, also known as Mr. O, was taken in by the hero called Wild Wild Pussycats. Despite despising heroes, Koga listens to his relative and assists the Pussycats because he has nowhere else to go. However, everything changes for him after Class 1A comes to train with the Wild Wild Pussycats, as Deku ultimately rescues him and defeats the villain who killed his parents. Showing how heroes put someone else's life before their own, Koga was finally able to see why his parents died and moved past his hateful disposition. Koga has also slowly begun to open himself up to others, though he is still rather indifferent and prideful. Finally, let's talk about Izuku Midoriya. Izuku's backstory might not be as awful as but he still has to grow up. Izuku was a worthless child living in a society where quirks were everything. He was considered a worthless failure, inferior to everyone else because of this, ever since he was only 4 years old, which makes his dreams of becoming a professional hero like his idol All Might feel all but impossible. He also said himself that all men are not created equal. What's more, his childhood friend Bakugo constantly bullies him. This is ostensibly due to Izuku's lack of a quirk, but it's really more about Bakugo's own feelings of inferiority. Izuku was called worthless and was even told to commit suicide. Not to mention the adults around him encouraging the behavior as they did nothing to stop the bullying. Although Izuku was always an incredibly kind person, it must deeply hurt to always be told that you are worthless and consistently being bullied. And that wraps up our dive into the tragic backstories of some of the most compelling characters in My Hero Academia. From Shigaraki's painful descent into villain to Eri's heartbreaking imprisonment, these stories remind us that even the most powerful heroes and villains are shaped by their past. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the world of My Hero Academia. Which character's backstory hit you the hardest? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video. minus Izuku Midoriya? That's what we'll find out in today's video by breaking down the thoughts and opinions of friends, heroes, teachers, and even villains. Whether they love him, respect him, or straight up hate him, everyone has something to say about Deku. So, without further ado, let's start with what everyone from Class 1A thinks of their hero and classmate. Starting with Shoto Todoroki. Shoto initially saw Zuko as a rival because connected with All Might, but he gradually grew to respect and appreciate him. After Zuko helped him perform his dark past during the UA Sports Festival, they formed a deep friendship. Shoto admires Zuko's kindness and determination, with Shoto often supporting Zuko during his battles, even emotionally. Shoto also said that he's someone who reaches out to others, even when he's struggling himself. Next, we have the class president Tenya Ida, who initially saw Izuku as a distraction and potential hindrance, but after witnessing Izuku's selflessness during the entrance exam, his opinion changed. He came to respect Izuku's bravery and later apologized for his earlier judgment. Over time, they developed a strong friendship, although he sometimes gets frustrated with Deku's recklessness. Despite this, Tenya admires Izuku's determination, even comparing him to his own younger brother. They consistently support each other, striving to become better versions of both. Tsuruashi respects and admires Izuku as he thinks he's a very hardworking person, saying that every day he does his best with the purpose of becoming a hero. He does, however, have to correct his shyness about calling her by her first name as she sees him as a close friend. He cares for him, worries about his safety, and encourages him to rely on his friends instead of carrying burdens alone. Just like Aki, Hinekado Tokoyami admires Izuku's decision-making skills and his willingness to help. Their friendship is built on mutual respect, with Tokoyami valuing Izuku's strength and acknowledging how he's helped him grow stronger. Now let's talk about Otako Uraraka, who said that, "When I see Deku, he makes me want to do better." Not only does she admire his tenacity and perseverance, we also find out in the final war arc that Otako wants to become in love with Zuko. As she reportedly claims to Hinata Koga to marry him forever. Otako appears to be devoted, especially when it comes to spiritual things. However, as we know, Otako is incredibly
Something
also,
bad
we also know that Tsuruashi is himself. Ryo and Shima have communicated through the attitude toward Izuku, though they don't often interact due to Shimi's behavior and beliefs. Sachio
I
also
don't
supports his
get
friend Otaka when
copyrighted.
she said that she thinks Izuku is an All Might otaku. Overall, she values their friendship as classmates. Overall, Shima finds Izuku manly. He admires Izuku's willingness to throw himself into battle even when he's scared or uncertain, saying that Midoriya's got guts. He's always rushing in to save people. Someone who had a complex view of Izuku was Yuga Aoyama. Initially, he sees Izuku as someone who lacks skill and uses him as bait during the entrance exams. However, as they become classmates, Aoyama's perspective shifts, and he grows to admire Izuku's hard work and determination. And eventually, Aoyama saw himself in Izuku. Hachi also was later the notorious crook, but now he's gotten so strong. So Aoyama wanted to be his friend. However, in the end, Aoyama was the traitor. But he was touched by Izuku's unwavering belief in him, and their shared struggles in their course. Ultimately, Aoyama deeply appreciates Izuku's support and kindness, which fosters a genuine friendship between them. The next character is someone who isn't very complex at all, Minoru Mineta. Mineta admires Deku for his heroism, quick thinking, and determination, despite initially being skeptical of his abilities. Although they have grown to be friends, Mineta gets very jealous over the attention Izuku receives from the other girls in class, saying that it's unfair. And I understand why he thinks it's unfair. With that cool costume, I can't figure out why Mineta doesn't get into girls. Someone who also gets jealous about the attention Izuku gets from girls is Denki Kaminari. Although he gets jealous, he also sees him as a diligent and hardworking friend. Kaminari has expressed that their bond is important despite their differences, but he also said that he is way too intense sometimes. Sanshiro Ojiro has a supportive and caring view of Izuku. He gets along well with him and often expresses concern for his well-being. Ojiro admires Izuku's growth and resilience and stands up for him, showing a deep sense of camaraderie. Meizo Shoji thinks highly of Izuku's compassion and teamwork, saying that Midoriya has a strong heart. He always cares about his friends and does everything he can to protect them. Hanza Sero sees Izuku as a dependable friend and teammate. Hanza also admires how Izuku never gives up, and he was very happy when Izuku asked him for help with his Blackfoot birth. Now let's talk about Kyoko Jiro. Kyoko and Izuku have developed a mutual respect and budding friendship, and she appreciates how Izuku is
I don't
always
play
trying to do the
Uno.
right thing,
This is
but
a
she finds his intensity
wait.
a bit overwhelming sometimes, saying that always giving 110%. It's cool, but dude, chill out every once in a while. Moto Yamarozu respects Suzuki for his leadership skills and sees him as a friend. Although their partnership as class reps was short-lived, he admires his determination and ingenuity. Toru Hagakure and Izuku haven't interacted much in the story, but from what we know, she values their friendship as classmates and stands by him. As seen when she defended him against Aoyama's attack and quickly informed him about Aoyama being the traitor. However, we do know that Hagakure said this about Izuku. Even though Deku see All Might every day at school, he would
guys,
probably go to an All Might handshaking
that's
event. And I don't think she's wrong. Another classmate that hasn't interacted much with Izuku is Rikido Sato. However, as we know how close everyone in Class 1A are, we know how much they all respect Izuku. Sato, no doubt thinks the same. Before we go over about Bakugo, who I know you're all waiting for, we have Koji Kodo left to quickly talk about.
okay.
And Koji admires Deku's bravery,
Okay,
especially since they
I
both
know.
started off shy,
I
saying
know
that Midoriya is
natatapunan
doing
ko.
great. He makes me want to be stronger too. Now let's talk about Katsuki Bakugo, Izuku's childhood goal, who has a complicated relationship with him. In the beginning, we saw Izuku as weak, even coming up with the nickname Deku, which has the meaning useless person or good for nothing. And this is why Bakugo at first hated Izuku, as we see during the river scene. Izuku wanted to help him, but when he reached a hand, Bakugo saw it as he was beneath him. And Bakugo has always been told that he is the best and strongest, and that he isn't beneath anyone, which is why he started to hate Izuku. But over time, their relationship evolves, and even though Bakugo struggles with Izuku's growth and power, he eventually acknowledges him as a true rival, apologizes for his past bullying, and even risks his life to protect him. He also explained to him and said that, "Every day I was made to feel how strong you were and how weak I was." Later, their bond deepens even further, becoming a fierce yet supportive friendship.
Yes.
So, right now, Bakugo sees Izuku as his closest friend. We've all heard what everyone from Class 1A thinks of Deku, but what do the other classes think of Iku's history with Izuku? Well, let's start with Nato Monoma. Monoma initially views Izuku with resentment and envy, often targeting him
Yep,
with
that's
taunts and
me.
mockery due to his feelings towards Class 1A. He considers Izuku a main character, and himself a side character, reflecting his belief that he's overshadowed by Izuku's popularity and achievements. But during the final war arc, Monoma acknowledges Izuku's strength, and how hard he's fighting for everyone. Monoma's classmate Itsuka Kendo thinks that Izuku has crazy field tactics and that he fights ruthlessly. However, she said that when she sees him at school, in the corridors, or the cafeteria, his image is very different from that of a cool and strong hero. And I can absolutely understand why. Let's continue with people from UA and let's talk about Hitoshi Shinso. Shinso initially views Izuku with hostility, especially during their first encounter at the sports festival. However, after their battle, he gains respect for Izuku, acknowledging his strength and determination, ultimately appreciating Izuku's willingness to help him pursue his goal of joining the hero course. The genius Mei Hatsume sees Izuku as a valuable ally and a source of inspiration for her inventions. Initially drawn to him for his success in the sports festival, she appreciates his shared enthusiasm for heroism and his openness to her ideas. Despite her habit of invading his personal space, she respects his
Sila
talent
kuya.
and is eager to support him with her gadgets, ultimately forging a close and collaborative relationship. Now let's talk about one of the upperclassmen of UA, and that is of course Mirio Togata. Mirio holds Izuku in high regard, and he was impressed by Izuku's battle IQ when Mirio fought all of Class 1A. Mirio recognizes Izuku's potential as a hero and eagerly offers him guidance, believing he would be a good fit for Sir Night Eye. After being through a lot together, they now share a very strong bond. Now we have to start talking about the pro heroes, and who better to start with other than the homeroom teacher of Class 1A, Shota Aizawa. Initially doubting Izuku's potential as a hero due to his reckless use of his quirk, he gradually comes to see his determination and talent. Despite often clashing with Izuku's idealism and scolding him for overusing his powers, Aizawa cares deeply for him and trusts him in
Wala kuya.
critical situations,
Pagdating nila,
ultimately seeing
kaya
him as a
maglalaro.
capable hero and encouraging others to support Izuku during the final battle. Endeavor's views on Izuku evolve significantly throughout the series. Initially, he sees Izuku as a competitor with power reminiscent of All Might's and expresses the importance of Shoto surpassing him. Despite some reluctance to train Izuku, he grows to respect him, especially after Izuku helps save his son Natsuo. During critical moments, Endeavor grapples with his own insecurities, feeling inadequate compared to Izuku's heroism. Ultimately, he acknowledges acknowledges that Izuku embodies the qualities of a true hero, even admitting to himself that Izuku is a better hero than he is. The number 2 hero Hawks has a deep respect for Izuku, recognizing his strength and heroic spirit. He's impressed by Izuku's skills and bravery, especially after witnessing him defeat Lady Nagant despite being heavily injured. Now let's bring out some tissues and talk about Sir Night-Eye. Initially, he doubts Izuku's worthiness as the inheritor of One for All, viewing All Might's decision to pass it to a quirkless boy as a mistake. However, he becomes impressed by Izuku's field awareness during their training and acknowledges his potential as he recognizes similarities between Izuku and All Might's heroic resolve. By the end, Night-Eye admits that Izuku is indeed worthy of One for All. Gran Torino recognizes Izuku as All Might's worthy successor, praising his potential and quick thinking. Throughout their training, Gran Torino grows to respect Izuku.
Oh, 1 hour na. Bye.